YouTube, what is up? It's your boy Jumpman J23, and I'm back with you for another video, another reaction video. This is Three Scary True Roommate Horror Stories by Mr. Scares. Here we go.
I first met Daniel when I needed a roommate to share rent in a small two-bedroom apartment. Rent prices were high and I couldn't afford to live alone. Daniel responded to my post, and from our first meeting, he seemed like a kind, normal person. He had a polite manner, a friendly smile, and a calm voice. I quickly felt at
Friendly
ease with
smile.
him, and we decided to move in together. Early on, everything was peaceful. He was tidy and helpful, sometimes cooking meals or fixing small problems around the apartment. It felt like I had found the perfect roommate. In the beginning, living with Daniel was enjoyable. We both had jobs in the same part of town. He worked at a little bookstore, and I worked at a nearby coffee shop. In the evenings, we'd watch movies together or share stories about our day. Occasionally, he surprised me with dinner or offered to cover chores I disliked, like taking out the trash.
Surprise with dinner.
We split expenses and responsibilities without a problem, and I thought we got along better than most roommates. I appreciated his calm, friendly demeanor, and it made me feel comfortable. For a while, everything seemed perfectly normal. Then, slowly, things started to change. Daniel began coming home later, sometimes looking tired or distant. When I asked where he'd been, he'd shrug and say he was with friends, but his tone felt off. There were nights when I'd hear him on the phone, speaking in a low voice. Once I caught him saying something about risk and people not finding out. I tried to
What?
convince myself it was just a misunderstanding.
Nah, he
Still,
did
it
something.
became harder to ignore the sense that something about Daniel was turning secretive and unsettling. One night, I arrived home later than usual and found the apartment dark, except for a dim light in Daniel's room. As I passed by, I heard a soft noise, like quiet sobbing. I knocked on his door, asking if he was okay. He took a long moment to answer, then said he was just tired and wanted to sleep. The crying stopped as abruptly as it began, and the silence left me feeling uneasy. The next morning, he acted perfectly normal again, making small talk over breakfast as though nothing unusual had happened. Yet, the odd happenings kept piling up. I started noticing stains on his clothes that he tried to hide. Once, I found a small knife with dried blood on it in our bathroom cabinet.
Damn, I knew it.
When I asked about it, Daniel claimed he had cut his hand while preparing food. He laughed off my concern, but something inside me felt wrong. Over time, I grew more anxious around him. I told myself it was just my imagination, but my gut told me otherwise. There was a heaviness in our apartment that I couldn't quite explain, and it seemed to follow me everywhere. Eventually, my suspicions pushed me to invade Daniel's privacy.
Man, nah, mind
One
your
night, when he
business.
went out, I went into his room. My heart pounded as I looked through his things until I found a box hidden under some clothes. Inside were newspaper clippings about unsolved murders.
Damn.
Some pages had Daniel's handwritten notes in the margins, and there were photos of victims and odd personal items. I felt my stomach lurch as I realized this was more than simple curiosity. Shaking with fear, I put everything back, ran out of the apartment, and called the police from a nearby park. When officers arrived, I led them to the box. They seemed worried too, and began asking me about Daniel's behavior and schedule. I mentioned the stained clothes, the bloody knife, and his late-night phone calls. After gathering information, they advised me to stay somewhere safe while they investigated. Scared and overwhelmed, I stayed with a friend and tried to carry on with my daily life. My thoughts, however, were filled with dread and confusion. I couldn't believe my friendly, polite roommate might be involved in terrible crimes, yet the evidence seemed too strong to deny. Days later, the police contacted me again with alarming news. They had arrested Daniel. He was caught
Damn.
trying to dispose of belongings linked to another victim. The evidence from our
Damn.
apartment, plus what he was carrying, connected him to several unsolved murders.
I knew
I
it,
felt
bro.
both relief and shock, realizing that I had shared a home with a dangerous murderer. Memories of Daniel's kindness clashed with the horrific truth. My mind reeled at how I had missed the warning signs, and I couldn't stop picturing every time we had cooked, talked, or laughed together. It was terrifying to realize how easily I had been fooled. Returning to the
Easy.
apartment to pack my belongings was one of the hardest things I have ever done. The rooms felt eerie, as if they still held the echoes of Daniel's secrets. As I sorted through my things, I found a note from him in my room. It read, "I'm sorry you found out this way. I never wanted to hurt you. You were the only real friend I had. Goodbye." My hands trembled as I read
Damn.
those words. I could not decide if they were genuine or another manipulation.
Just be happy you wasn't one of the victims, man.
Either way, it left me feeling torn, frightened, and strangely sad. Not long after, I moved away to another city, trying to start over. Yet the memories haunted me. I grew more cautious and fearful, no longer trusting people at face value. Although I know I am not to blame for Daniel's actions, I still wonder if I could have acted sooner, maybe saving lives. The
Man,
darkness I lived with remains a part of me, a reminder that evil can hide behind a friendly smile. Even now, I keep my distance from others, always looking for signs of danger. Living with Daniel changed my life forever, and I will never forget it. Before we dive into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories.
Are you drowning in payday loan debt? Have you taken out multiple payday?
he messed up by damn. He messed up by talking about he had a the dude like had a nice demeanor, man. I mean, you can't really go off somebody's demeanor for real, for real. Especially if you're trying to live with somebody, like nah, bro. But yeah, he learned his lesson though.
I was 30 when I decided to find a cheaper place to live. My old apartment was becoming too expensive, and I needed a quick solution. One day, I spotted an advertisement for a room in a 3-bedroom house. The rent was low, and the landlord, Mr. Thompson, did not ask many questions. He did not even do background.
Hold on 1 second. Let's get back to it.
One day, I spotted an advertisement for a room in a 3-bedroom house. The rent was low, and the landlord, Mr. Thompson, did not ask many questions. He did not even do background checks.
Damn.
I found that strange, but I was in a rush and could not afford to be picky. The house was old, with creaking floors and narrow hallways, but it felt comfortable enough for my needs. When I first toured
That should have been a red flag that he didn't check, background checks, man.
the place, Mr. Thompson showed me the layout: 3 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a cozy living room, and 1 bathroom to share. He barely spoke about rules or expectations. I only knew I would have one roommate named
He didn't give a
Elizabeth.
damn.
That
He copped and
afternoon, I
killed.
signed a simple agreement and moved in. As I placed my boxes in my new room, I felt a slight chill in the air, but told myself it was just an old house settling around me. Elizabeth worked at night and slept during the day. Because of her schedule, we hardly crossed paths. I never even caught a glimpse of her during my first month there. Her door was always closed, and I rarely heard a sound coming from her room. Although she seemed to keep to herself, I sometimes felt as if there was another presence in the house, like someone watching from a hidden corner. At first, I thought I was just uneasy about living with a stranger I never saw. Soon after I settled in, odd things began to happen. I would place my keys on the kitchen counter, then later find them on the dining table.
Mm.
My toothbrush, which I kept in a cup by the sink, sometimes felt damp when I had not used it. I tried to think of logical explanations.
There's nothing
Perhaps I was
logical about
stressed
it.
and forgetting where I placed things. Maybe the house had small leaks or drafts that made items shift. But as days passed, it became harder to ignore the strange feelings growing inside me. One evening, I returned from work and noticed the front door was slightly open. I was certain I had locked it that morning. My heart began to pound. I stepped inside carefully and called out, "Hello, is anyone here?" The house was quiet, but there was a tense quality to the silence. Nothing seemed stolen or moved, yet I felt as if someone had been there just moments before. That night, I triple-checked every window and door, making sure each lock was secure. Still, as I tried to sleep, every creak made me tense up. Late at night, I started hearing soft noises. Sometimes, they sounded like light footsteps coming from the second floor. At other times, I heard a gentle humming, almost like a lullaby. These sounds froze me in my bed. I kept telling myself it was just an old house, but I could not ignore the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. Even if Elizabeth was home, why would she walk around when she was supposed to be at work? And if she was not there, then who was making those sounds? Then came a Friday night that changed everything. I decided to unwind in the living room with a late TV show. I was half distracted, sipping some tea, when I suddenly felt as though I was being watched. My skin prickled. I glanced over my shoulder but saw nothing. Trying to stay calm, I looked back at the television. Without warning, the overhead light flickered and went out, leaving only the dim glow from the TV. My stomach tightened. I turned around slowly and, in the doorway, saw a figure.
Oh shit.
Okay, everyone is
Hey,
trying to
that
come
kind
up
of
with
got me
crazy
right there a
ways to
little
skip
bit.
ads. Like,
Glow from the TV. My stomach tightened. I turned around slowly and, in the doorway, saw a figure. It was Elizabeth. She stood in the shadowy hallway, her face
that
hidden in the
shit,
dark. I
that
could
shit
not
was
see her
crazy,
eyes
bro.
clearly, but I felt her staring at me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she
What
turned
the
and
fuck?
silently disappeared down the hall, leaving me shaken.
Man, hell
Elizabeth, I
no.
called out, my voice trembling.
Nigga
There was no
scared, bro.
reply. Fear rushed through me, and I hurried to switch the lights back on. Everything felt surreal. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door, my thoughts racing with questions. Who exactly
God
was
damn.
she, and why did her presence feel so unsettling? That night, I barely slept. Every rustle in the hallway sent chills through me. By morning, I was certain I needed to get away.
Hell
I
yeah.
packed a small bag and went to a nearby motel, craving a sense of safety. Once I
God
was
damn.
there, I called Mr. Thompson and told him about the eerie events, including Elizabeth standing in the dark. He sounded worried but not surprised.
What the fuck?
He asked if I was okay, yet he offered no real answers. Something in his voice made me think he knew more than he was telling. After a much-needed rest at the motel, I decided to return to the house the next day to gather the rest of my things. As I stepped inside, the house felt different. It was quieter,
Yeah.
but the silence was heavy. I rushed to my room to pack clothes and personal items. On my way out, I noticed Elizabeth's door was slightly open. My curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed it wider. The room was dim, covered in dust, as though nobody had lived there for a very long time. A small bed stood against one wall, and old photographs hung near it. Stepping closer, I saw that the photos showed a young woman who looked exactly like Elizabeth. In one picture, Mr. Thompson stood next to her, much
What the
younger than
fuck?
he was now. Curious, I flipped the photo over and saw a date from 20 years ago.
Was she
My
a
heart
ghost?
pounded. If these pictures were so old, how could Elizabeth still look the same today? Suddenly, I heard a faint creak behind me and spun around, but no one was there.
What the
Gripped
fuck?
by fear, I grabbed a photograph and dashed out of the house, determined to confront Mr. Thompson. I went straight to his office and showed him the picture. He grew pale and finally confessed that Elizabeth was his sister who had disappeared 2 decades ago.
Damn.
He admitted he kept her room untouched, hoping she might return one day. He could not explain how a person who resembled her had appeared in the house, or why she looked unchanged after so many years. Frightened and confused, I took my things and left, vowing never to return.
Hell yeah. Damn. Hey, that was a good one, man. Yeah, that was a good one. Hey, but that little jump scare kind of got me too a little bit. But yeah, that was straight right there.
I never imagined that moving into a small apartment in the city would lead me to such a terrifying experience. It started very simply. I was excited to find a place with low rent and a location close to my new job. I thought life would be easy and peaceful, but I was wrong. My roommate, Alex, turned out to be someone I will never forget. From the moment I met him, I felt something was off. He was tall and thin, with eyes that seemed to look far beyond me, as if he saw things I could not. In the beginning, I told myself he was just shy or preferred solitude. He spent almost all his time in his bedroom with the door locked. He rarely came out, and when he did not speak much. For a while, I tried to believe that we simply had different habits, and that living together would become more comfortable over time. But it did not. At night, I sometimes heard Alex whispering. The sounds were soft at first, like he was on the phone. But as the nights passed, these whispers became louder and more urgent, as though he were in deep conversation with someone, or something, that was not in the room. I told myself not to worry. Perhaps he was just watching scary movies or practicing lines for a play. I tried to ignore the growing unease in my stomach. Strange odors began to drift from Alex's room. It started as a mild, unpleasant smell, but soon became so strong that I could not pretend it was normal. It reminded me of something rotten, like spoiled meat or garbage left outside for too long. When I asked Alex about it, he laughed in a strange, hollow way. He said he had spilled something and would clean it soon, but the smell never went away. If anything, it got worse. I also noticed the way Alex seemed to glide through the apartment. He moved so quietly that I sometimes did not realize he was standing right behind me.
Man, goddamn.
Late at night, when I woke up to get a drink of water, I would see him in the hallway. His eyes would follow me, dark and cold, and it felt like he was watching every move I made. I would hurry back to my room. One night, when I could not sleep, I decided to find out what Alex was doing. As quietly as I could, I walked to his door. It was slightly open, and a sliver of light spilled out into the dark hallway. My heart was pounding, but I pushed the door a bit wider.
All these ads, bro.
Inside, I saw Alex standing in the center of the room, surrounded by lit candles. Their flickering flames made giant shadows dance on the walls. Alex was holding an old yellowed book, and he was chanting in a deep, strange voice. I could not understand the words. It sounded like a foreign language, or perhaps no language at all.
Latin.
The air felt heavy, like something dark and dangerous was hovering in the room. Suddenly, I noticed a shape in the corner. It was hunched over and twisted, with eyes that glowed in the candlelight.
What the fuck?
The sight made my heart skip a beat, and I stumbled back in fear. Without thinking, I turned and ran to my bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I hid under my blankets, trembling, praying that dawn would come soon and bring some sense of safety. When morning arrived, I hoped daylight would make everything better. But things did not improve. They got worse. Alex became more unpredictable. His whispers were louder and more frequent, and he hardly seemed to eat or sleep.
Could have packed your bags.
He would stare at me for long periods like he was studying me. One evening, I gathered the courage to ask him what was going on, but he only stared through me and said nothing at all. Then, one night, Alex simply vanished. His bedroom was empty. The candles were blown out, and the strange book was gone. I looked through every room in our small apartment, but he was nowhere to be found. I should have felt relieved, but a feeling of dread clung to me. It felt like he was still around, watching me from somewhere I could not see. Days turned into weeks, and there was still no sign of Alex. I tried to go on with my normal routine, working, cooking, and sleeping.
You should have left too, bro.
Yet each time I entered the apartment, a sense of unease covered me like a dark cloud. I would jump at small sounds and glance over my shoulder, expecting Alex to be there. Then came the scratching. Late one night, I heard a faint, scraping noise inside the walls. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just a mouse or a rat. But the noise grew louder and more persistent until it became impossible to block out. It sounded like something with sharp claws scraping against the inside of the wall, trying to break through. Before long, the creatures appeared. They crawled out of dark corners, their bodies contorted in unnatural shapes, their eyes glowing with an intense, frightening light.
Damn, look at that dog.
I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as they skittered across the floor. There were so many of them, and they all seemed to look right at me. It felt like they were waiting for a command, like I was a trapped animal in a cage. At that moment, I realized I had to escape. I grabbed my keys and dashed for the door, but then I saw him. Alex stood in the doorway, blocking my path. His face looked paler than before, and his eyes were emptier than I had ever seen.
What the fuck?
"You can't leave," he said, like a judge delivering a sentence. "You belong to us now."
Damn.
Terror gripped me, and I somehow found the courage to push past him. I ran down the hallway and out of the building, never once looking back.
Hell yeah.
My heart raced, and I could barely breathe until I was far, far away.
Damn. Hey man, all three of those were pretty good. Which one did y'all find the scariest? The first, second, or the third? I think shit. It's not the last two, honestly. Probably that second one, but this one, the last one's pretty good too. All right, comment, like, subscribe, man. I have another video coming out tomorrow. It's scheduled already, so be on the lookout for that at 6 o'clock Eastern. So, all right, man, y'all deuces.